Well, I have great respect for her. Really quite unbelievable with it, because that is a great woman.
It was never about duty. For Camilla, it was always about the crown. That was the line scrawled across the Daily Ledger's Sunday front page, printed in gold serif over a photo of Queen Camilla, lips tight, gaze distant, watching from the shadowed edge of the Windsor reception hall. In the same frame, perfectly lit, stood Catherine, the Princess of Wales, exchanging a genuine laugh with Melania Trump. Her hand rested lightly on Melania's wrist, their eyes locked in a moment that said more than any headline could. Diplomatic grace belonged to Catherine. And for the second time in 2 weeks, Queen Camilla was not the woman the world remembered, or wanted. The first wave of humiliation had arrived like a well-timed tsunami. At the royal banquet held for the Trump family's state visit, it wasn't Camilla who stole the spotlight, it was Catherine. Again, the American press crowned her the new jewel of diplomacy, while British tabloids abandoned subtlety entirely. One columnist from The Guardian posted a blunt question that trended for 36 hours. Why is Camilla always out of frame? But it was wave 2, unexpected and almost cruel in its intimacy, that broke the Queen's composure. In a video posted by Ivanka Trump, the former first daughter captured a quiet moment outside the Rose Garden, where the family had gathered for a private tea. Donald Trump, rarely soft-spoken, reached out, took Catherine's hand, and said plainly, "You'll make an extraordinary queen one day. The world can already see it." The camera panned slightly, just enough to catch Camilla's stiff reaction from a distance. What followed was not just a media cycle. It was a cultural moment. One where optics, symbolism, and personal history collided. Behind closed doors, the palace was not quiet. Sources close to the royal press office confirmed that Camilla requested an immediate recalibration of the PR schedule, an impromptu charity visit, a rare televised interview proposal, and most notably, a reframing initiative that included crafting press-friendly narratives about her past sacrifices for the crown. But the timing was impossible to control. The royal household had already seen the internal polling. Public favor for Catherine had reached an all-time high, particularly among the under 40 demographic in both the UK and North America. Even traditionalist royalists, once critical of Catherine's modernity, now saw her as the embodiment of regal resilience. Camilla, meanwhile, was drowning in the optics of being overshadowed at her own event. "She's not being replaced," one royal aide clarified. "She's being reevaluated." Oh, the tension between Camilla and Catherine is not new, but until recently, it has been staged behind carefully choreographed curtain calls and etiquette smiles. Insiders have long spoken about respectful distance and parallel commitments, but this new moment wasn't about event scheduling, it was about public loyalty. Camilla had the title, Catherine had the trust, and that terrified the Queen. It wasn't just that Catherine had received the Trump family's de facto endorsement, it was that the endorsement felt earned. Whether one agrees with the Trumps or not, the visual symmetry of Catherine standing among world leaders, treated as an equal, not as someone's wife, not as someone's shadow, spoke volumes. Camilla's history, by contrast, remains complex. Her rise to queen consort had been paved not only by personal perseverance, but by carefully managed forgiveness, first from the royal family, then the public. Yet the scars of Diana's legacy remain, and now, Catherine's rise was reigniting those quiet comparisons. Within 48 hours of the second wave, palace watchers noticed a sudden uptick in Camilla-related engagements, a previously unscheduled visit to a children's hospital, a pop-up gallery event with British veterans, even a seemingly impromptu moment where she paused outside a floral market to accept roses from a young girl who awkwardly asked, "Are you the Queen, or is Catherine going to be the Queen?" The footage went viral. Camilla's awkward smile said more than a denial could. What followed was a 3-minute silence from the Queen's communications team. No follow-up statement, no denial, no joke to cover the moment. The team knew there was no way to spin it, and perhaps that was the most revealing detail of all. Why it matters, the emotional capital of royalty. Modern royalty is built on symbolic trust, not absolute power. The people don't vote for queens, but they feel them, and the British public is clearly feeling Catherine. Camilla may sit beside the king, but Catherine walks into rooms where world leaders offer chairs. That distinction matters, especially in a world where influence is no longer inherited but earned through authenticity, grace, and media presence. Which brings us back to that photo, the one on the Ledger's front page. Catherine, mid-laughter. Camilla, blurred in the corner. And the crown? More visible than ever, though not on Camilla's head. Let me know when you're ready to continue with part 2, 8,000 characters, where we'll dive into how Camilla's past PR strategy is unraveling, the Diana echo now reigniting across Gen Z and millennial platforms, internal palace fallout, and what Charles said in private. Catherine's unexpected next move after the Trump visit. Ready to proceed? Camilla did not speak to anyone that night. Not to Charles, not to Laura, not even to her staff. Back at Clarence's house, after the Trump banquet, the Queen Consort's heels clicked like threats down the corridor. Every step echoed like a warning. A footman opened the door to her private suite and quickly disappeared. No one wanted to be near her when her face looked like that tight-lipped, pale, unblinking. She poured herself a scotch with one hand and ripped off her pearl earrings with the other. The televised replay of Ivanka's glowing remarks about Catherine played on mute. The Queen Consort stared at the screen, watching Catherine's photo rotate between shots of Melania Trump's gentle praise and Ivanka's poised delivery. "She's not even queen," Camilla whispered. Laura, still in her heels, walked in without knocking. "Mother." Camilla didn't turn around. "We were erased. On our own stage. In our own home." Laura scoffed. "I warned you she plays the long game." The room went still. Camilla finally turned. "And what exactly do you think you're doing with that tone?" Laura rolled her eyes and poured herself a drink. But behind the irritation, there was fear. By the following morning, Catherine was front-page news in every major UK and US outlet. Not because she tried, but because others couldn't stop talking about her. The Times headline read, "Grace in Action. Catherine wins global praise." The Telegraph called it, "Catherine's quiet diplomacy triumphs again." CNN aired a glowing segment replaying Ivanka's words. "She doesn't just represent the crown, she represents calm. Catherine is the kind of leader women notice." The phrase stuck, "women notice," and Camilla noticed that they noticed. She summoned her PR chief immediately. "Why wasn't there more coverage of our garden project? Or our literacy visit to Wales?" she snapped. "Ma'am, with respect, they did cover it. But it wasn't front page, was it?" The PR chief hesitated. Then, there's a deeper resonance when the admiration comes from someone else, especially when it's unsolicited. Camilla waved him out. She knew exactly what that meant. She had spent years trying to force relevance. Catherine didn't have to lift a finger. That evening, during a reception at the V&A Museum, Camilla made her next move. She approached a cluster of reporters and offhandedly said, "We've all admired Catherine's style. But of course, style isn't everything. The world needs more than pretty smiles." The press frozen. The following day, Twitter exploded. Pretty Smiles Gate trended within hours. The narrative turned sharply. Every old tabloid headline about Camilla resurfaced. Side-by-sides of Catherine during humanitarian visits and Camilla attending luxury horse races filled social feeds. Even palace insiders were stunned. "She blinked first," one aide told The Guardian, "and it backfired." Meanwhile, Catherine said nothing. She issued no response. She appeared at a neonatal hospice charity event, kneeling beside a child with muscular dystrophy, handing her a hand-drawn card. One photo, one moment, one headline. Dignity doesn't clap back, it leans in. Back at Clarence's house, Camilla watched the clip in silence. Charles sat across from her, jaw clenched. "We said this visit would build unity," he finally said. Camilla didn't reply. Charles stood and left the room without another word. She was alone again. And this time the silence wasn't power. It was a warning. "So why now?" one reporter finally asked. "Why do you think the world is reacting so strongly to Catherine's presence again, especially after the Trump visit?" The question didn't just hang in the air, it detonated. Because everyone knew the answer. The shift had already started. But no one had expected it to be this public, this humiliating, and this swift. Camilla's team had spent weeks preparing for her upcoming initiatives. Speeches, outfits, charity appearances, carefully choreographed meetings. But all it took was one unfiltered moment of Ivanka and Melania glowing with genuine admiration for Catherine, and everything collapsed like a house of cards. Behind palace walls, insiders said Camilla was furious. She had always seen Catherine as the polished but passive one, too proper to fight back, too restrained to eclipse her. But something had changed. The Catherine who returned to public life wasn't just radiant. She was sharp, warm, and commanding. And she didn't need PR spin to do it. Her actions spoke louder than any press release. Originally, Camilla had planned a private luncheon with the Trump women, one that would be photographed, heavily promoted, and spun into a narrative of unity and influence. But when the Trump motorcade pulled up to Clarence's house, something went wrong. Very wrong. An aide rushed into Camilla's suite, pale-faced. "Madam, they've canceled." "What do you mean canceled?" "They're outside," Camilla snapped. "No, ma'am. They're heading to Windsor. To see the Princess of Wales. Privately." For the first time in years, Camilla reportedly raised her voice, something she'd always criticized Diana for. The press didn't catch the outburst, but they didn't need to. The optics were clear. America's most famous political family chose Catherine again. After the Windsor debacle, Camilla did something bold and reckless. She brought Laura, her daughter from her previous marriage, into the public eye. It was supposed to be a show of modern royal family dynamics. Instead, it was chaos. At a charity gala 2 nights later, Laura arrived in a cream dress nearly identical to one worn by Catherine during a UN Children's Summit. The paparazzi noticed. Instagram noticed. But most importantly, Ivanka noticed. When Laura reached out for a double-cheek kiss with Ivanka, she received a single handshake and a curt smile. Melania looked away entirely. And then, the moment that was clipped, captioned, and spread across TikTok, Laura, loudly laughing, said, "I suppose we all want to be the people's princess now." A breath, then silence. Ivanka blinked slowly. "No," she said. "We just respect women who actually do the work." By dawn the next day, Camilla's press team had gone dark. Scheduled interviews were canceled, appearances postponed. The palace issued a brief, vague statement about rest and reflection. But sources say behind the scenes, Camilla was drafting a response not for the press, but for the king. She wanted to discuss titles. She wanted to remind Charles that Catherine, for all her goodwill, had not been born into royalty, that some traditions required blood. But the king had already seen the viral clip. He had already seen Catherine in the garden with Melania and Ivanka, hands in the soil with children, laughing naturally as cameras rolled. He had already seen the headlines, Queen of Hearts, Part 2. He didn't respond to Camilla's letter. He didn't need to. Across the country, the shift was palpable. Murals of Catherine appeared in Edinburgh. Cafes renamed pastries after her in Manchester. School children in York wrote letters saying they wanted to grow up to be just like Princess Catherine. And perhaps most telling of all, a London taxi company removed a decades-old photo of Charles and Camilla from its fleet and replaced it with a simple quote from Ivanka. Catherine doesn't speak often, but when she does, everyone listens. For the first time in her public life, Camilla wasn't just being outshined. She was being replaced. Sources close to Catherine say she was uncomfortable with the media war. She didn't ask for this spotlight. She didn't engineer it. But when the moment arrived, she didn't back away either. She released a statement, quiet, composed, but direct. "There is room in this world for many kinds of strength. I will continue to serve where I am needed." And that was it. No accusations, no counterattacks. Just an open hand and an undeniable presence. The message was clear. She wasn't trying to take the crown, but she wouldn't let it silence her either. And in the background, while the headlines swirled and royal watchers speculated, Camilla made a call to her old advisor. "What do we do now?" she asked. There was a pause. Then, "We pray Catherine slips." But Catherine wasn't slipping. She was rising, and the world was watching. The tabloids called it the third wave. Social media users had their own phrase, number Queen code. It wasn't about crowns anymore. It was about something far more dangerous to Camilla: admiration. Earned, not inherited. And Catherine? She didn't say a word. Not during the press conference where President Trump praised her diplomacy. Not during Ivanka's teary-eyed Fox interview describing their late-night talk on women in power. Not even during the viral segment when Melania, turning to the cameras, simply said, "She listens, and then she acts." Camilla, however, spoke. Too much, too soon. On the morning of the NATO brunch at Claridge's, royal photographers noticed an unusual seating arrangement. Camilla's name card, once positioned center-right, had been discreetly shifted. A senior aide confirmed the adjustment came at the request of an international guest. That guest was Ivanka. It wasn't personal, it was political. "We just thought she should be closer to Catherine," Ivanka later explained on a podcast, "because we were continuing a conversation from the night before. About clean water, about maternal health, about results." Camilla didn't hide her irritation. At the event, she arrived in an emerald coat and matching hat, an echo of the outfit Catherine had worn at the Rwanda visit in 2022. Commentators noted the uncanny similarity. The Daily Mail ran side by side. And the public noticed something else. Catherine looked entirely at ease. Not performing, not asserting, just present. She greeted dignitaries with natural fluency, switching between French and Italian. She gave the Turkish First Lady a handwritten note about a mutual aid project. And when a Ghanaian diplomat introduced her daughter, Catherine knelt down to the child's eye level and said, "Do you like books? I love them." That clip? 47 million views in 18 hours. Back at the palace, Camilla called an emergency meeting with her communications team. "We need an initiative," she said, fingers tapping the armrest. Her advisors suggested revisiting her anti-literacy campaign. "It's not a campaign," she snapped. "It's a movement. And we need a photo op with Laura. Get my daughter here by Friday." That moment broke protocol. Laura Lopes, Camilla's daughter, had long avoided the royal spotlight. A gallery curator by trade, she preferred London's quiet art circles to Buckingham's public affairs. But now, she was a pawn. Their joint appearance at the British Museum's reading room was carefully staged, matching camel coats, a stack of children's books, and smiling pupils. The press were invited, but Catherine's name was whispered in every journalist's notepad. "Is this to rival what Catherine did in Ghana?" one murmured. The photos looked forced. The headlines weren't kind. "Camilla copies Catherine again. From Queen Consort to Queen Competition. Royal rebrand falling flat." Worse, the public could smell desperation. Meanwhile, Catherine had vanished from public view. No tweets, no press. Just a single story leaked from a small nonprofit in Bristol. She funded the entire year of therapy for 10 displaced refugee families. No cameras, no press release. She just showed up and said, "Let me help." By the weekend, BBC aired a special, Modern Monarchy, The Catherine Effect. Narrated by a former ambassador, it chronicled her rise from duchess to global symbol of soft power. "She doesn't outshine them," he said. "She renders them irrelevant by simply being too useful." Camilla watched the segment twice. Then she turned to her assistant and whispered, "Cancel Monday. I need something bigger." For 3 full days, the British press was quieter than usual. Not because there wasn't anything to say, but because no one wanted to be the first to say it. The footage was still trending. Millions had watched it. Melania and Ivanka Trump, warmly recounting their admiration for Catherine during a press interview, their words practically gushing. And Camilla? Barely mentioned. What rattled the palace more wasn't what was said, it was what wasn't. The absence of Camilla's name had created a vacuum so loud it echoed in every tabloid boardroom. Piers Morgan hinted at it in his segment. The Daily Mail danced around it. Even the BBC's evening panel awkwardly transitioned every time Camilla's name surfaced. Meanwhile, social media was ablaze. The phrase, "Future Queen Catherine," trended for over 48 hours. TikTok edits of Catherine's public service efforts were spliced with clips of Melania calling her a beacon of grace and real strength. Camilla, despite decades of public positioning, was nowhere in sight until she made herself seen again. It started with a scheduled visit to a rural community center in Wiltshire. Camilla arrived 47 minutes late, reportedly due to weather delays, although the skies were clear. Her press team scrambled. Cameras were ushered into position. Children lined up holding flags. Camilla smiled, posed, even made a brief speech about women's health. But the headlines weren't hers. The public wanted Catherine, and Camilla knew it. What happened next was widely interpreted as damage control. Her PR agency leaked an alleged behind-the-scenes moment between Camilla and Ivanka during the Windsor State dinner. The article described Ivanka praising Camilla's resilience, how she called her a true survivor of royal storms. It didn't land. Within hours, Ivanka's spokesperson issued a brief but brutal statement. Miss Trump recalls no such conversation. Silence again. But this time it was colder. And then came the gala. The Royal Arts Fund Gala was supposed to be a feel-good event. Camilla had curated the theme herself, a heritage of strong women. She arrived in an emerald dress, flanked by Laura Lopes and a slew of younger aristocrats. The optics were intentional, but then the Trump daughters walked in. Ivanka and Tiffany Trump were not on the original guest list, but their presence turned every camera. Ivanka wore a champagne-colored gown with a brooch, identical to the one Catherine had worn during her last charity tour. Tiffany held a small clutch that bore the crest of a youth foundation Catherine helped fund in Kenya. Subtle, but not lost on the audience, Camilla noticed. And for the first time that night, her smile cracked. Laura Lopes tried to regain control, pulling her mother into whispered conversation. A photographer caught a moment of tension, Laura pointing at Ivanka across the ballroom, Camilla pursing her lips, almost trembling. Then came the speech. Camilla took the podium with expected regality. She thanked the organizers, made reference to the new wave of international female leadership, and then veered into what many would call petty waters. "It is easy to show up in gold gowns and flashing cameras," she said, "but harder to carry duty through the mud. Harder still to earn respect when one has not inherited the weight of responsibility." The room stilled. Ivanka blinked. Melania, who had arrived late, raised an eyebrow. A few attendees coughed uncomfortably. When the speech ended, the applause was tepid. Camilla descended the stage not to the usual crowd of admirers, but to murmurs and clipped nods. That night, Number Petty Queen trended on Twitter. And then something happened that no royal staffer could have prevented. Catherine uploaded a short, silent video. She was in a modest room, surrounded by volunteers of a women's health charity in Liverpool. She poured tea, tied hair nets, and handed out food. No words, just faces, gratitude, dignity. The video reached 2.4 million views in 3 hours, and not a single frame featured Camilla. Palace insiders would later say Camilla's outburst after seeing the video was legendary. Some say she knocked over a vase. Others claim Laura had to intervene. All agree on one thing: Catherine had said nothing, and yet had spoken louder than anyone else. The Queen consort was supposed to lead, but she was chasing shadows, and shadows do not trend. For weeks, Camilla had been silent. Not a statement, not a photo op, not a carefully staged charity event, just silence. But silence in the royal court isn't absence. It's calculation. And Catherine knew it. Buckingham insiders whispered about Camilla's final card, that she wouldn't leave the stage quietly, not after decades of clawing her way up, and certainly not after being upstaged by Catherine 3 times in the span of 1 month. First the Windsor Gala with Melania, then the humanitarian roundtable with Ivanka, and most recently, the viral school visit where a child had spontaneously called Catherine "my queen." It wasn't just the public's affection. Camilla was losing. It was the very narrative she had spent years constructing. A mysterious invitation was sent to the press. A private royal appearance at an art exhibition tied to women's diplomacy and global education, a subject Catherine had long championed. Camilla's name was not on the announcement, but her office had reserved a private room within the venue. Her team, it seemed, was going rogue. Catherine arrived precisely on time. The cameras loved her. Calm, assured, elegant, but not staged. She shook hands with Nigerian and Ukrainian education advocates, whispered kind words to Afghan exiles, and quietly introduced a new fund supporting displaced female students. Then came the disruption. Halfway through a scheduled panel, the doors opened. Camilla entered, flanked by Laura Lopes. It was a move so unexpected, even royal correspondents took a full minute to process it. Laura had never attended public events of this magnitude, and now she was here, in powder blue, clutching her mother's arm like a political accessory. Catherine looked up, nodded politely. Camilla did not nod back. Instead, she marched forward and requested publicly to address the panel. There was a beat of confusion. Then an aide whispered to the moderator. Another pause. The moderator, visibly tense, leaned toward the microphone. We, welcome any royal presence that supports our mission. Please, Your Majesty. But Catherine intervened. Before we proceed, she said gently, perhaps we could invite the students from the Refugee Scholarship Program to present their work first? They've traveled quite far. The audience applauded. Loudly. Camilla was cornered. To refuse would seem petty. To comply would mean ceding spotlight. She chose the latter. But what followed was a masterclass in contrast. The students shared stories that made the room cry. Catherine stood behind them, supportive but not dominant. When Camilla finally took the mic, her speech felt hollow, filled with rehearsed lines. A weak attempt at relatability, and no clear action plan. Laura stood awkwardly beside her, unsure whether to smile or scowl. Within hours, clips flooded social media. TikTok users compared the posture, poise, and presence of the two royals. One viral comment read, "Camilla came to take the mic. Catherine handed it to the girls. That's the difference." By evening, international outlets ran headlines. Catherine shines, as Camilla fumbles surprise appearance. Trump family global voices align. The people have chosen their queen. Royal drama unfolds on stage, but Catherine keeps her crown. And perhaps most damning, Fox ran a segment simply titled, "The People's Queen Isn't Camilla." 2 days later, a palace source leaked a memo. Camilla had scheduled a solo humanitarian tour to former colonies in the Caribbean, a clear bid to reclaim moral ground. It backfired instantly. Several Caribbean leaders refused to meet her. One prime minister said publicly, "We stand with Princess Catherine's education initiatives, not symbolic visits." The press called it a snub. Online, users called it a slap. And just like that, Camilla's final move became her undoing. Catherine, meanwhile, issued no statement. She didn't need to. Instead, she quietly expanded her foundation's partnerships with women-led startups in sub-Saharan Africa. Melania Trump posted a photo with her holding hands in a virtual summit. Ivanka tagged her in a tweet about international girls' education. And Buckingham, perhaps sensing the tide, began rebranding its public bulletins, replacing the Queen and Princess of Wales with simply Princess Catherine. It wasn't an abdication, it was a realignment. One headline captured it best. Camilla holds the title, Catherine holds the future.